Welcome to Why I Quit, a show that interviews people quitting their 9-to-5 jobs in search of something different. Listen to inspiring conversations where we dive deep into the stories of why people quit their jobs, what were the hardest parts, where are they now, and any advice for people following the same path. I'm so excited to introduce Jeff Chenault as today's guest on Why I Quit. Listen as Jeff dives into how he dropped out of college to jumpstart his career, how he spent his career working towards breaking into the music industry to design album labels, and how this led him to realize about the type of creative work that he's most passionate about. Learn how Jeff took these experiences to quit his full-time job over 15 years ago and start his own design agency called 1107.
Thanks for joining us today. It's always good to see you, and I'm excited to kind of get into a little bit of your past jobs and careers and lead that into where you are today.
I'm happy to be here.
Walk me through post-school. What was your first job?
One of my professors at the Kansas City Art Institute was one of these, working professional professors. So she had a design firm that was just her. She was a freelancer. She was very influential to me. Her name's Kelly Ludwig. Something about learning from her just was really inspirational. As I was coming up on being ready to graduate, she said, I really need another me. I need somebody else. Would you come work for me? And I was like the highest form of flattery because she was my mentor, basically. So that was cool, and it was just her and I in her house. She had like an attic that she'd converted to a studio. And for a while, when I first started, actually, there was literally just the one computer that she had been using. This is 1992. It was a long time ago. And so I would work on the computer and she would take meetings and go meet people or be sketching at the kitchen table. This is before the attic office was complete. So then we finally had 2 workstations and we were up and running, and I was only there for 2 years. I mean, it felt like a really long time. I guess when you're that age, 2 years feels really long. And it was amazing, to see her process and get to learn from her in a way that you don't learn from somebody at school. I had about a year left on my 4-year Bachelor of Fine Arts degree. She really needed somebody now, so I went to work for her. I did not finish my BFA. I tried out a week. She's like, just come see what it's like. So this is over the summer, and I was like, I'm learning so much more being a working professional and jumping in. And I was paying for my own school. My parents weren't able to pay. I was like, man, I could go into debt, one more year, or I could start making money, learn more, and start my career. So that's what I did. And it's never affected me, in my line of work, in creative art direction, graphic design, whatever. Education doesn't really matter. It's more about the work. If your work is good, people look at your portfolio or your designs or whatever, and they like your work. It doesn't really matter where you went to school. It doesn't really matter if you graduated at all. So I never completed my 4-year degree. I have an associate's, and I'm maybe I'm a semester away from having my BFA. And I always kind of thought, well, someday I'll maybe go back, or I'll do summer or night or something and finish it. And next year that'll be 30 years ago, and I never did that. So
yeah, it's interesting to hear you say that, because it's you're starting to see some trends forming and some bucking against kind of this 4-year college traditional norms. And in your opinion, do you see that changing?
I think that's the thing. I think it really depends on the industry and the type of job. No accounting firm is going to hire somebody that doesn't have their CPA, things like that. I think school is important to learn basics. As somebody who used to then, later I was managing creative departments and hiring staff, managing staff, something that a lot of people don't get from school is real world, actually how to work experience, So school is great up to a point, but there's only so much you can learn in school. I can't tell you how many times I'd hired somebody based on their work and meeting them and a vibe, but then realizing that they just have no idea how to perform in a business environment, especially when it comes to art. So it's very difficult, and this is something I've been railing on for years, and I've often thought about pitching this as a class at art schools. It's all great to learn how to make pretty pictures and make designs look wonderful and understand the color theory and all those things. But there should be a class about the sort of real world business part of art. And it used to be called commercial art. I mean, before graphic design was a term, it was my degree, my associate's degree is in commercial art. And those two words are very important. You know, it's not, I would have kids coming out of school like, well, you know, I think it should look like this because it's my art. It's like, no, it's not your art. You're actually designing for a client. You're designing, there's a set of goals, there's a set of parameters, there's guidelines, you know, all these things. So it was something that I still think a lot of people coming out of art school have a hard time adjusting to, from doing what they want to performing in the role of you're supposed to be doing what the client wants. And you are a conduit to get them, you're trying to get them to where they want to be and use your expertise to achieve their goals for their projects. So it's pretty interesting.
As you're getting towards the end of the 2 years in that first job, where's your head at in terms of, is this inspiring you to want to start your own agency? Are you looking to go corporate to get some more corporate experience? You know, how does that transition into what comes next?
The whole reason I am a freelancer is because of that experience. I think when I was in school even, I was learning from people who were out there doing it in the world, and I was like, I want to be like that person. And I loved that they had ultimate control over every aspect of the process, with dealing with the client directly, you know, all the give and take. You're not talking with an account executive that's filtering it down to the creative. So it was hugely influential to me and is ultimately the reason why I quit and why I left, because then I went from there. I worked in-house at maybe 3 or 4 different companies, and those were all wonderful experiences in their own way. But in the back of my head was always this, someday I want to do my own thing. I want to be every role. I want to be the person that solves these creative problems for clients. There's just something about it like that. And after working in-house for, I guess it was, 15, 20 years, something like that, maybe 15 years. One day I was turning 35, I think, and was sort of burnt out where I was working. And again, that idea that had been in the back of my head my entire life of like, I really want to do my own thing. It was sort of a, why not now? And I also kind of felt like if I didn't do it then, I would never do it. It was one of those, I just was so done with where I was working and I didn't have a house yet. I didn't have a child yet. I wasn't married. I had all this experience and all these contacts and all these, I had a great network. And it was just like, you know what? Now's the time. I'm just going to do it. And everybody thought I was crazy. They're like, well, that seems like the kind of thing you should do in the beginning of your career, not when you've got all this, experience and you're climbing the ladder and now you're a vice president and you're this and you're that. I'm like, no, it's the opposite. Like now I have the support system. I have the network. I have the experience to know what I want, to know that what I want is not working for someone else and working in-house, and to say, it's time. So I just jumped, and that was 2007, so 14 years ago.
So it seems like you always had this thought in your head that you wanted to have your own thing, but you still had about 10 to 15 years that you were working in-house for different companies. Were there points that you almost jumped and didn't? Were you trying to get more experience? Or did you just think like, hey, I'm comfortable, I'm making money, this is good? Like where was your head at that time?
I didn't. So even though it was in the back of my head, I did not. I went from job to job very happily. Once I started I think because I started working so early and not working for myself, I liked having a job. I liked having a paycheck, and I liked climbing, taking one job and sort of turning it into something else. And like, so my ultimate goal, I knew when I was like 10 or 11 that I wanted to be a graphic designer. That's when I figured out what that was a job. This is before, nowadays everybody's very aware of graphic design in our modern lives. In 1983, that wasn't the case. And that's when I found out through a friend of my parents who was a graphic designer. And he told me, it was like, this is, everything you see is designed. The menu at the restaurant, like somebody designed that. The poster at the package of chips on the counter at the store, somebody designed that. And I was like, whoa, that just blew my mind, because again, just awareness wasn't there. So I knew that I wanted to work in the music industry when I was like 15. I was like, that's what I want to do. I want to design album covers. That's my ultimate job. So then every job that I took kind of got me closer to that. I started working at Hallmark Cards and was doing artwork there. And that, I was there for about 3 years. And that was huge because it always looked so good on my resume. Everywhere I've ever interviewed, people are like, wow, Hallmark Cards, that name meant something. And so then I went to LA and worked there. And then I went to New York, and each way I was getting closer and closer to music. And then I finally got that job. I did it for many years because my goal was to design for music. And a lot of that work is done in-house by these record companies. The whole working for myself thing really took a backseat. I really focused on, this is what I want to do. I need to sort of infiltrate it's very hard to get those jobs because a lot of people want them and they're very few and far between. So it took a long time to get in. And once I got in, I worked in that industry, that part of the industry for maybe 8 years. And
so when you're taking these other jobs, like in your mind, you're like, I need to get to music is where I want to design. So you are strategically thinking about like, hey, this job will help me climb the ladder a little bit more, give me experience in this realm, and then this next one. And then at that time, are you applying to different, music agencies? Are you networking in there? Is that like happening on the sidelines?
And it was a combination, I think, of both. I think not only was each job sort of getting me closer, but it was also, I wanted to work on things that I was interested in, so like I refused something that I decided to do very early on. I decided that I would never work somewhere that didn't give me something back personally, I would never just take a job to take a job. I would never take a job for the money. I would never, I wanted to work places that were truly interesting to me. And that's this is what I do for a living because it's a passion, and I wanted my job to be my passion. I didn't want to just have a job. Even though, like Hallmark Cards doesn't really do anything for music, but I knew that I would get to work with lettering and art and things like that. And I knew that the name would help me. And then it was also they're based in Kansas City. So it was like a huge thing to then take that from Kansas City, where I grew up and where I went to art school, and to be able to go to LA and have a big, Fortune 500 kind of name on my resume already at the age of 25. So that was huge. And then I got into the gaming. I was doing packaging and things for gaming. But yes, that whole time that I lived in LA, I was applying, trying to get jobs at MCA and Capitol and Universal. And it was hard because everybody was like, oh, I love your work. I love your style. I like who you are. But you haven't done anything in the music industry yet. So there's this chicken and egg thing that went on for years and years, where it's like they want somebody who has experience, but you can't get the experience until somebody gives you a chance. Because it was the same thing when I went to New York. So I was like, well, let me go try New York. Tons of labels out there. Same thing. No experience, chicken egg. So what I started doing was approaching bands and artists and singer-songwriters and offering to design things for them either at whatever they could afford or for free. So I would have my day job, and on the side, I was sort of my side hustle, as they say now, was I would approach a band and say, like, hey, do you have an album coming out that you need to design? And I would design these records. So then I did have the experience, even though I wasn't working in a record company setting, I had that work in my book. So I could say, and it was such a BS thing to be told, oh, well, you don't, it's literally just a different template. You know, you're either a good artist, you're either a great designer or you're not. You either have the eye and you understand things or you don't. So for them, it was such a cop-out all those years, but it's such a click. It is such a, now that I've been in it, it's such a, just a stupid little club, you know? It's like, oh, well, you're not in the club, so you can't join the club.
So those initial bands, you know, that you were going after, were you picking bands that you liked and that you listened to?
Anybody who would, yeah, anybody. Because I was I knew that this was the way I was going to get the experience that the labels would deem necessary to be part of the club. Because I was going out to see music anyway, you know, so, and, you know, you're going to these small clubs, both LA and New York. There's so many clubs that it's very easy to approach bands. You know, there's not this sort of barrier to access that you get sometimes in a smaller market. So yeah, just before or after the gig, beeline it right over there and say, hey, you know, do you guys need some help? And 9 times out of 10 they did, because they were doing it themselves. This is before everybody had Photoshop, and before it's so much easier now for people to create their own artwork and get, you know, there's disc makers and all these easy ways for people to put out music themselves. This is before all that. So there was a lot of demand, you know, a lot of people were like, wow, I can have like a real designer, like make our album look cool, you know? So that's how I did it. That's how I finally cracked the code and got to be part of the club.
Was it what you wanted it to be, like, when you got there? Like, was it what you expected, or did you have like different expectations, since it, like, you know, was like a journey to get there?
I would say yes and no to that. You know, like, it was everything I expected and more. Were there aspects of it that I hadn't anticipated? Absolutely. The work itself is wonderful. You're having a great time. The biggest con, I guess, if you want to call it a con, the biggest con is that a lot of times the artists and bands themselves can be really difficult. You know, like, to be honest. I mean, sometimes some are great and some are just crazy or a pain or don't understand. You know, everybody's different. So every time you interact with somebody in any business, it's a new personality that you're dealing with. It's a new set of politics that you're dealing with. And so with these bands, I mean, every band, and it's not only the band, it's their manager, and it's the product, you know, the person within the record company who is their representative, whether it's the A&R guy or the product manager or whatever. So every project came with a set of cooks stirring the pot, or that wanted to taste it and throw their little it needs more salt, you know? So that part, you don't think about that part of it, but that's with any corporate setup.
Now walk me through, like, when does the thoughts of starting your own agency start popping up again? Were there like specific moments when you were like, I need to do this? And what were some of the things that caused that?
Yes, the answer is yes. There were specific things. So I was in a position where I was doing the job of like 3 people, basically. When I first started doing it, it was exhilarating and it was cool. You know, I was in charge of not only all the photography and design for this record company, but I was also in charge of making all the music videos too, and managing a staff and some other things. It was really fun. I learned a lot, but it got to a point where it was just too much. You know, there weren't enough hours in the day. I also, because there was so much going on and it kept growing and growing, I also found myself doing less and less actual design work. So I was the department head. I was just going to meetings and picking people in my staff or hiring freelancers like me to do the actual work. And then I would be presenting it, taking the notes, going to the meetings and getting yelled at by whoever and doing no art. I was directing art, truly an art director in the sense of I would say, well, I want it to look like this, or we need to do it like this, or we should change it in this way. So I was involved, but I never had any hands-on creation of art. It got to the point where I never created anything. So it was those two factors, like getting away from what I loved, the hands-on creation of projects, and being so overwhelmed and so busy that I just couldn't even think straight, and so like those two things, to have one of those things is bad, like, oh, okay, I'm not doing my art anymore, but I like the job or whatever, or I'm so busy, but I still get to create, so I can deal with it. But to have both of those things working against it, it was just, that was the catalyst where it was like, it really, I had like a come to Buddha moment, where it's like, this is not why I got into this. And that was part of it, like climbing the ladder over the years. What I found out was once you're at the top, you're not really doing what you enjoy anymore. At that point, you're just a manager. The reason I got into it, which was to create for business, create for projects, create for clients, which I love, I wasn't doing that anymore.
When you had, these people you mentioned earlier who were, kind of questioning your decision when you're actually making the decision to quit, did you have any of those feelings on your own, or were you just so ready to leave that you were, excited about it and going to make it work no matter what?
I'd say there was like 5% doubt. I was so motivated. Actually, there was one project in particular. It was for my brother, actually. He lives in Los Angeles, and he was doing a weekend recreational tennis thing. And he's like a total like indie rock hipster, holier than thou hipster. So he started this like indie rock tennis club. So there's like all these like LA hipsters getting together and play really bad tennis on the weekend. And he needed a logo. He wanted to legitimize it. So he said, will you design me a logo? So I did this for him. It took, I don't know, like an hour. Or maybe it was like an afternoon, but I hadn't done anything like that in a while. And doing that, I was like, I am more fulfilled in that 4 hours that I spent on that than I've been in a couple years of my actual job. I was like, I got to get back to, that really was like what pushed me over the edge. I don't think I had much doubt, honestly. Because I had a network, because I knew people, because I knew that the place I was leaving would hire me, because I understood their artists, because I understood their internal framework, and I knew all the personalities of the different departments. I knew, and I kind of did some research with them. I was like, hey, if I left, like, would you guys hire me to do some things? And like, and I spoke to some of the artists. Like, there was a band in particular that was coming up. Their project was coming up. They wanted me to work the project, and I said, look, I'm thinking about leaving. You're going to have to hire me as a freelancer to do the project. And they're like, absolutely. So I kind of had some jobs even like built in already.
I know a lot of people are nervous to have conversations like that, right? They're nervous of how the company or their manager is going to react. Did you have any doubts with that? Or, was it one of those things where you just wanted to be honest and being like, hey, this is what I'm going to do. Is there any opportunities? Worst thing they can say is no.
I think I knew who I could talk to and I knew who I couldn't, I didn't have any open conversations with my direct, like the president of the company or the VP. I knew who I could run things by in confidence. But then once I did bring it to them, everybody was very supportive. They didn't want me to go. They tried to throw money at me, and I was like, it's not about that. And it was actually a significant increase. I was like, it's really like, again, I was like, unless the job can change, unless I can do more creative or have less responsibility, then I'm not interested. The job just was no longer something that I wanted. And it had forced me to realize that the desire to do my own thing had been long overdue. And it really was like, if I don't do this now, I'm never going to do it. If I stay here and get sucked back in. And even if they did change the job for me, if I don't do this now, I probably will end up working in-house the rest of my life, which is fine. But I wanted to know what it would be like, because it's what I wanted to do in college, because it's what I sort of idolized early on. And to me, that was like the purest form of being a designer, is doing it yourself, doing everything yourself, being the only guy. I love the freedom and I love the individuality, and, I love collaborating with people when the project dictates it. But I love that every part of the process, I'm touching it and I'm managing it. And I don't know, that part's really important to me.
And I know, like, a lot of people that are thinking about quitting or are thinking about starting their own business, I think a lot of people don't know how it's going to go, where a paycheck's going to come from, what health insurance looks like, like all
Right.
these like things you kind of like figure out as you go on. For you,
Right.
as you dove in and did that, what did that transition look like? And what were some of the harder parts and things you learned along the way that you kind of, look back and wish you knew before you jumped into it?
It definitely was a process. Being more of an artist than a business person, quote unquote, I didn't give a lot of thought to that side of it. I definitely kind of figured things out along the way. I mean, I still, 14 years later, I would say my bookkeeping system is prehistoric, and but it's fine. That's all I need. You know what I mean? I don't use QuickBooks. I don't use any kind of software like that at all. I literally have like a place that I track my hours, a place that I notate how much I'm charging for this and that. It's basically like a notepad. And that, it's not physically a notepad, it's on the computer, but I just don't need that. I don't need, and I refuse to get sucked into that part of it. And that's another thing I like. I can control how that part of the business, the administrative part of the business, is done. But there have been some, like for years until even now, like I don't use contracts on every single job. And for a long time, I never used contracts. And I'd say it was probably 10 years until it bit me. I'd say that's the biggest thing. No matter how small the job is, no matter how insignificant it might seem, get some sort of agreement. And I don't like doing it. It's a waste of my time. I hate it. I hate proposals. I hate RFPs and all that stuff. To me, that's just a waste. But it's a necessary evil. It's a lot of, that's part of the sad thing of like where the world has gotten now. Like, again, like 15 years ago, like RFPs weren't even a thing. Like, you showed them your work, you talked about the job. If they thought that you would be a good fit for the job, you just did it, and now it's like, everybody's submitting proposals, and the proposals are all so hollow because our time is all valuable as service providers. So you're taking your like boilerplate thing, you're updating a few things, you're personalizing it and trying to make it look personalized. It's 10 pounds of fluff that you're handing over to them when all they really should do is meet with you, look at your work. That part is very frustrating because I feel like I waste a lot of time submitting proposals, and even the ones that you spend a lot of time on, it's 9 times out of 10, it's a buyer's market, and so it's frustrating.
One thing I've always been like super impressed with you is like your ability to prioritize, your time, whether it's, traveling, deciding what projects you want to work on, all of these different things. Walk me through a little bit of your thought process when you're, thinking about what projects you want to take on, like how many hours you want to work that week or even that month or what that looks like. How do you balance all of that out?
It's, a lot of it is sort of done by the universe. If I'm really busy, I do usually have a really good sense of how long it's going to take to do something. So, and I, as a freelancer and as somebody who I enjoy new creative challenges, so I try never to say no to a job, but there are times when you have to. And sometimes it's dictated by the budget. Sometimes it's dictated by my schedule. And sometimes it's just, again, the universe decides to step in. When I'm less busy, I'll take on things that I might not when I'm busy. So, and that's good and bad. You know, sometimes there's a job where you're like, I really don't want to do this, but I'm not busy this week, and it's money, and, you know, I can probably make it better than the next guy is going to do. So I might be like, I look at it as like, oh, okay, I'm gonna over deliver. You know, like the budget's not really there, so I know their expectations are here, so I'm just gonna blow them away, and I don't have anything else going on this week or that week, 3 weeks from now. So maybe I'll win them over, or maybe by doing that job that doesn't pay that much, the word of mouth from that person will lead to something. I really do believe in like commercial corporate karma, you know? So it's like, I think if you put good things out into the world, it will come back. I've never really had to cold call for business or to go solicit work. So sometimes I'll do something, you know, and it was like a crappy little project at the time, but it trickles down to somebody who does have a budget and finds their way to me through word of mouth that way.
And as people are thinking about like starting their own businesses and, you know, potentially like, you know, quitting their jobs, I think like if you can, whatever you do, if you can deliver value, you know, I think you can make a business out of it. But, you know, I think sometimes that can be very tough to do when it's a smaller customer and you don't think it's worth your time and money, but you really don't know where that could end up leading.
Right. Yeah. You could blow somebody off and it could really bite you. I've seen that happen a lot. I've had some friends who are like, oh, whatever, blow that guy off. And then it did end up affecting some other projects for them down the line. So it can happen. And I think the other tip too is because all marketplaces are so crowded, the key for me is like differentiate yourself in some way. So like not only deliver, but deliver in a way that is unique to you and what you can offer, what your business can offer, whether it's a product or a service. Over delivering is great, but you also have to, what if the next guy is also over delivering? Like what makes you different? What's going to get that, just nudge you just up a little higher over that other guy? And know what differentiates you, because then it's something you can talk about.
If you want to tell, you know, everyone a little bit about what you do and like the easiest way to find you if someone is in the market for some design services.
Sure, man. I am 1107 Creative. It's just me. I just like it sounding larger than myself. And, you know, we offer full service creative services for any, you know, advertising, marketing, design, music, photography, video content, all these things. Like I said, we like to give us a challenge and let us get you to your goal creatively. And you can find us at www.1107.com.
Thank you for listening. It really means a lot to us. We want to hear from you as we keep growing. Please reach out on whyiquit.co with any feedback, or if you have any guests that you think would be a good fit. Subscribe on whyiquit.substack.com to get an update every Wednesday with the newest guest. Follow us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or YouTube to get notified with the latest episodes. Also, a special thanks to Chris Dole for the music. Check out his newest album, Here's to You. Thank you, and we will be back next Wednesday.